We all know the image. It's etched into our collective imagination. A small figure, ragged and exhausted, standing on the precipice of a volcano, holding a simple gold ring. This is the moment, the culmination of thousands of miles and impossible suffering. Frodo Baggins at the cracks of doom, the fate of Middle-earth balanced on his decision. And we know what happens next. He claims it for his own. He fails. The hero, at the final step, falters. It's only the desperate, slobbering intervention of Gollum that accidentally, miraculously, saves the world. It's a stunning moment, a tragic and triumphant climax. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Here is the question that, once you ask it, unravels the entire story we thought we knew. What if Gandalf knew this would happen? What if the wisest of the Maiar, the architect of the entire quest, looked at Frodo Baggins from the very beginning and understood, with a certainty that would have broken any lesser spirit, that this hobbit would fail at the end? What if he sent him anyway? Because what we're about to uncover isn't a story about a plan that almost went wrong. It's the story of a plan that was never, ever supposed to succeed by conventional means. It was something far stranger, far more profound, and infinitely more daring. It was a plan built not for victory, but for a miracle. So let me ask you this. How do you win a war when you know your chosen champion cannot possibly strike the final blow? You change the definition of winning. To understand the sheer, breathtaking audacity of Gandalf's strategy, we first have to dispense with the comfortable, heroic version of the story. The official version, the one discussed in hushed, urgent tones at the Council of Elrond, is a mission of stealth over strength. Sauron's eye is fixed on the mighty, on the armies of men and elves, on the heirs of Isildur. He would never conceive that his enemies would seek to destroy the Ring of Power. And he would certainly never suspect that the instrument of this destruction would be a hobbit, a creature of no account from a land of peaceful obscurity. The plan, as presented, is simple. Sneak into Mordor, get to Mount Doom, and throw the ring into the fire. It relies on the unique resilience of hobbits, their resistance to the ring's corrupting influence, which seems to be greater than that of men or even elves. Frodo is chosen because he is humble, good-hearted, and has already borne the ring for some time without succumbing. He is the best possible candidate for a task that demands immense spiritual fortitude. This is the baseline. This is what everyone, including Frodo himself, believes the plan to be. But beneath this surface, Gandalf is operating on a completely different level of understanding. The clues are there, right from the start. Listen to his words at the council. When Boromir suggests using the ring against Sauron, Gandalf's response is absolute. He says, if any of the wise had used the Ring of Power, they would have become a new Sauron, and the world would be in no better state. But then he says something even more telling. He doesn't just say that using it is corrupting. He speaks to the impossibility of willing its destruction. He knows that the will to wield it and the will to destroy it are fundamentally incompatible. The ring's very essence is domination. To hold it and wish for its end is a paradox. The ring simply won't allow it. It bends the will of the bearer to its own, which is always self-preservation. Gandalf has seen this before. He isn't working from theory. He's working from history. The great unspoken ghost at the Council of Elrond is Isildur. 2,500 years before Frodo Baggins was even born, Isildur, High King of Gondor and Arnor, stood in that exact same spot. He had just defeated Sauron on the battlefield. The ring was his. Elrond and Círdan, the wisest of the elves left in Middle-earth, were at his side. They implored him, begged him, to cast the ring into the fire. The moment was perfect. The way was open. Victory was absolute and within his grasp. And he said no. He claimed it as his own, a war guild for my father and my brother. It was a catastrophic failure of will, a moment of weakness that condemned Middle-earth to ages of shadow and fear. But was it just weakness, or was it a demonstration of a fundamental law? Gandalf, a being of immense wisdom and a student of law, would have spent centuries pondering that single moment. He would have read the scrolls, studied the accounts, and tried to understand the mechanics of that failure. He would have realized it wasn't simply a man's greed. Isildur was a great man, a hero of his age. The failure wasn't in his character, but in the nature of the ring itself. The ring is a piece of Sauron's own being, imbued with the totality of his malice, his will to dominate all life. To stand at the cracks of doom, holding the ring, is to stand at the nexus of its power, where its will is absolute. To choose, in that moment, to destroy it would require a will stronger than Sauron's own. And no mortal, no elf, no being in Middle-earth possesses such a will. Not Isildur, not Elrond, not Galadriel, not even Gandalf himself, as he admits to Frodo in Bag End. He knows that if he took it, he would try to use it for good, but through him it would wield a power too terrible to imagine. He understands that the desire to destroy it and the power to do so cannot exist in the same person at the same time. Isildur's failure wasn't an anomaly. It was the precedent, it was the rule, and Gandalf knew it. So if willpower is doomed to fail, what is left? If strength, courage, and resolve are insufficient, what other force could possibly contend with the ring? Gandalf finds the answer in the most unlikely of places, a dark, slimy cave beneath the misty mountains during a game of riddles. He finds it in Bilbo Baggins. When Gandalf interrogates Bilbo about his finding of the ring, he presses him, trying to understand every detail. And he learns of Bilbo's encounter with Gollum. He learns that Bilbo, holding a magic ring of invisibility and an elven dagger, had the wretched creature at his mercy. He could have killed him and escaped without a thought. No one would have ever known, but he didn't. A feeling came over him, a strange mix of understanding and revulsion. It was pity. Bilbo pitied Gollum, this miserable, lonely creature. And that pity stayed his hand. He leaped over Gollum and fled, choosing mercy over violence. Years later, Gandalf explains the significance of this to Frodo. He says, "Pity, it was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end, because he began his ownership of the ring so. With pity." This is not just a gentle moral lesson. This is Gandalf, the strategist, identifying the only weapon that has ever proven effective against the ring's corruption. Not strength, not wisdom, not power. Pity, a small, seemingly insignificant act of compassion. Gandalf realizes that the ring's power is based on domination, cruelty, and the annihilation of the self. Pity is its perfect antithesis. It is an act of seeing the other, of feeling for the other, of connecting with a shared suffering. It is a force the ring cannot comprehend and therefore cannot easily corrupt. This is the moment the entire quest pivots. Gandalf isn't looking for a warrior. He isn't looking for a king. He's looking for a vessel for pity. He's looking for a hobbit. Now, let's connect these threads, because this is where the sheer genius of Gandalf's true plan begins to emerge. He knows two fundamental truths. Truth number one: no one, not even the strongest hero, can willingly destroy the ring at the moment of truth. Willpower is useless against it. Isildur is the proof. Truth number two: the only force that has ever mitigated the ring's corruption and created a positive, unforeseen outcome is pity. Bilbo is the proof. So what do? You don't create a plan based on strength of will. You create a plan based on strength of character. You don't choose a hero who can succeed. You choose a hero who can endure. You choose a hero whose primary virtue is the very thing the ring cannot defeat. Compassion. You choose Frodo Baggins. Imagine Gandalf, years before the events of the book, sitting alone in the archives of Minas Tirith. He's poring over the ancient scrolls, the fragmented accounts of the last alliance. He reads Elrond's testimony. He reads the words of Isildur himself. He sees the story not as a tale of one man's failure, but as a spiritual equation. He sees the ring as a constant, its corrupting influence a law of nature. And he realizes the variable, the only thing that can change the outcome, isn't power, but grace. And how is grace earned? Through suffering, endurance, and mercy. The choice of Frodo is not a second-best option because no one else would take it. It is the only option. Gandalf isn't sending Frodo to succeed where Isildur failed. He's sending Frodo to fail differently. Isildur failed out of pride and a lust for power. Gandalf is gambling that Frodo, when he inevitably fails, will do so out of a brokenness and exhaustion born of pure goodness. And that this different kind of failure will invite a different kind of response from the universe itself. The mission is no longer about destroying an object. It's about performing an act of such profound moral endurance that it triggers a response beyond the material world. This brings us to the third and most crucial piece of the puzzle: Gollum. To everyone else, Gollum is a menace, a traitor, a miserable wretch to be pitied at best and killed at worst. Samwise Gamgee, the voice of common sense, wants him dead from the start. Frodo himself is tempted to kill him, but Gandalf is insistent. From the very beginning, he senses Gollum's importance. He tells Frodo in Bag End, long before the quest even begins, "My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before the end, and he will not be slain by me or any of the wise." Later, he tells him, "The pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many." These are not vague hopes. This is strategic foresight. Gandalf, having identified pity as the key variable, recognizes Gollum as the necessary catalyst. Gollum is the living embodiment of Bilbo's mercy. He exists only because Bilbo pitied him. He is later spared by Frodo for the exact same reason. Frodo, guided by Gandalf's wisdom, shows mercy to the one creature who least deserves it. He binds Gollum to him, not with chains, but with a promise, and with a compassion that Gollum himself can barely comprehend. Gandalf understands that the linear plan, Frodo walks to the volcano and drops the ring in, is a fiction. It's the story you tell the soldiers to get them onto the boats. The real plan requires a chaotic element, an agent of fate that has been set in motion by the very moral force the quest is meant to champion. Gollum is the eucatastrophic device, wound up and set on the board by Bilbo's pity, and carried all the way to the finish line by Frodo's. He is the unforeseen consequence that Gandalf, and only Gandalf, has foreseen. He is not an obstacle to the quest. He is the key to its completion. He is the physical manifestation of the mercy that is the quest's true weapon. To fully grasp what's happening here, we need to step outside the narrative for a moment and look at the mind of its author. J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Catholic, and his worldview was steeped in concepts of providence, grace, and what he called eucatastrophe. Eucatastrophe is not just a happy ending. It is the sudden, joyous turn. It's the glimpse of joy, the sudden grace of God that pierces through the sorrow and failure of the world. It's not luck. It is a miracle that feels both unexpected and yet, in hindsight, perfectly inevitable. Tolkien wrote that the resurrection was the greatest eucatastrophe in human history. The story of the ring is the greatest eucatastrophe in the history of Middle-earth. Gandalf is not acting as a general planning a military campaign. He is acting as a theologian, creating the conditions for a miracle. He is stage managing a eucatastrophe. He knows Frodo's will is going to break. He knows that at the final moment, the ring's power will be absolute. So, the plan is not to make Frodo strong enough to overcome the ring. The plan is to make Frodo good enough to deserve to be saved. The entire agonizing journey through Mordor, the starvation, the thirst, the despair, Sam's loyalty, and most importantly, Frodo's persistent, agonizing, world-weary pity for Gollum. All of it is a long, drawn-out prayer. It is an appeal to a higher power. Frodo's job is not to throw the ring into the fire. His job is to carry it, and the moral burden it represents, all the way to the precipice. His task is to exhaust every last ounce of his own goodness and strength in the attempt. His failure is not a flaw in the plan. It is the final, necessary component of it. It is the moment of absolute despair that makes the sudden, joyous turn possible. It is the darkness that proves the necessity of the light. And so we arrive at the core realization, the terrible and beautiful truth at the heart of this story. Gandalf's plan was an act of faith. He sent a good and gentle soul on a mission he knew was impossible for him to complete, betting that the goodness of the soul itself would be enough to call down grace. He was gambling the fate of the entire world on the idea that the universe is not neutral, but is tilted, ever so slightly, in favor of mercy. When Frodo stands at the Samath Naur and says, "I have come, but I do not choose now to do what I came to do. The ring is mine." This is not the moment the plan fails. This is the moment the plan succeeds. Because Frodo did his job. His job was to get the ring there. His job was to endure, and in that same moment, the consequence of all that endurance arrives. Gollum, driven by his own desperate need, but only present because of decades of pity shown to him, attacks Frodo. He is the chaos agent, the divine accident, and in their struggle, he bites the ring from Frodo's finger and, in his ecstasy, topples into the fire. The ring is destroyed, but it was never destroyed by choice. It was destroyed by a confluence of addiction, accident, and pity. It was destroyed by eucatastrophe. And now we must pivot, because this reframing of the quest changes what it means to be a hero. Heroism in this light is not about the final, triumphant moment of victory. It is not about having the strength to do what no one else can. It is about the journey. It is about the small, persistent, often unseen choices made along the way. Frodo's real victory was not achieved at Mount Doom. It was achieved every single time he chose to take another step. Every time he shared his water with Sam. Every time he looked at the wretched creature Gollum and chose mercy over murder. The true heroic act was carrying a burden that was destined to break him, simply because it was the right thing to do. This brings the grand, epic story of Middle-earth crashing into our own lives. How many times do we face problems that feel insurmountable? Systems of power, be they political, economic, or personal, that feel as absolute and unconquerable as Sauron. We are told that the answer is to be stronger, to have more willpower, to be the hero who can face down the darkness and win. But Tolkien, through Gandalf's hidden wisdom, offers a different, more radical path. He suggests that in the face of overwhelming evil, the most potent act is not one of power, but one of compassion. It's the choice to show mercy when you have every reason not to. It's the decision to keep going, to do your small part, even when you are certain of your own failure. We are not meant to be Aragorn, the king returning in glory. We are meant to be Frodo. We are meant to carry our own burdens, our own rings of power, as far as we can, for as long as we can. We are meant to fail, but we are meant to fail with a good heart. Gandalf's plan teaches us that the world is not saved by the powerful, but by the cumulative weight of the small, virtuous acts of the seemingly powerless. Our job is not necessarily to win the battle, but to conduct ourselves in such a way that we become worthy of the miracle that might. It's a profound shift in perspective. It releases us from the crushing pressure to be the one who solves everything, and instead asks us only to be the one who tries, the one who loves, the one who pities, the one who carries the burden to the very edge of the fire, trusting that the story doesn't end there. So let's go back to that image one last time. Frodo on the precipice. But now we see it differently. We don't see a hero who failed. We see a martyr who did exactly what was required of him. He was the vessel of suffering and endurance, whose journey created the moral conditions for salvation. He walked into the heart of despair and held on to his goodness until the last possible second. And it was enough. Gandalf's plan worked. It was just a stranger, sadder, and ultimately more hopeful plan than we ever allowed ourselves to believe. It was a plan that acknowledged the certainty of human failure, but refused to give up on the possibility of divine grace. The world was saved, not by a hobbit's strength, but by a hobbit's pity, and by the wisdom of a wizard who understood that the greatest power in the universe isn't a ring or a sword or an army, but the quiet, stubborn refusal to stop loving a world that is broken. When we look around at our own world, with all its shadows and its seemingly impossible challenges, perhaps that is the lesson we should take. The path to the light isn't always about a single, grand victory. Sometimes it's just about taking one more step, and then another, and trusting that our small acts of mercy are rippling outwards, setting in motion forces we may never see, creating the conditions for a eucatastrophe we may never get to witness. The quest, after all, is not about the end. It's about how we choose to walk the road.